U.S. stocks closed barely changed on Friday for a second day in a row as mixed bank earnings offset better than expected inflation news. The Dow dipped 0.33%, while the S&P 500 and Nasdaq each ticked up marginally. Friday also brought news of U.S. and British forces launching airstrikes in Yemen in retaliation for Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. While markets have so far largely brushed off global conflicts, Joy Yang, head of product management and marketing at Market Vector Indexes, believes they're finally starting to weigh on stocks.
We're seeing a lot of geopolitical tensions on the rise, and we're waiting to see how this will escalate. I wouldn't discount what's going on in the Red Sea, in China, Taiwan, in the Middle East, in Russia, Ukraine. We're waiting to see how this will escalate in an election year also. So I think a lot of people are just holding back a little bit to get some more news and information.
Data Friday showed U.S. producer prices unexpectedly fell in December. That was in contrast to a report a day earlier that showed consumer prices in December rose slightly. In earnings news, shares of Bank of America fell 1% after its fourth quarter profit shrank as the lender took $3.7 billion in one-off charges, while Wells Fargo dropped more than 3% after warning of a 7 to 9% drop in net interest income in 2024. J.P. Morgan Chase edged about 0.75% lower after reporting its best-ever annual profit and forecasting higher-than-expected interest income for 2024. But Citigroup rose 1% after reporting a $1.8 billion fourth-quarter loss and saying it was planning another 20,000 job cuts as it looks to restructure the business. United Health dragged down the Dow, its shares dropping more than 3% after the company reported higher-than-expected medical costs. Delta Airlines tumbled 9% after the carrier scaled down its annual profit outlook. And Tesla lost more than 3.5% after trimming prices of some new China models and suspending most car production in its factory near Berlin due to supply chain problems caused by the Red Sea conflict.
From a red-letter day for crypto fans to the drama that blew a hole in Boeing's stock, this is the week in numbers. $4.6 billion was the volume of shares in Bitcoin exchange-traded funds that changed hands on their first day of trade. The products had been given a grudging approval by US watchdogs a day earlier. Crypto fans say it's a big moment, arguing the funds will make it easier for people to invest in Bitcoin. 9.3% was the two-day tumble for Boeing stock after a big panel blew off one of its jets mid-flight. No one was seriously hurt, but the incident revived worries about its top-selling 737 MAX plane, which was previously at fault in two fatal crashes. White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre said travelers had the right to feel safe.
And in that spirit, these particular Boeing aircraft will remain grounded until operators complete enhanced inspections.
Over 35,000 was the level hit this week by Japan's Nikkei stock index. That's a high not seen since early 1990. Equities have jumped after the country's New Year earthquake led investors to rethink bets that the Bank of Japan would soon raise rates. Close to $3 trillion is now the market value of both Apple and Microsoft, and the two are engaged in a fierce fight for the title of the world's most valuable company. On Thursday, Microsoft briefly overtook the iPhone maker to seize top spot. By close of play, Apple was top again, but analysts say the momentum is with Microsoft, thanks to its leading role in artificial intelligence. And $4.7 billion was the funding unlocked by a deal between Argentina and the International Monetary Fund. IMF loans to the country had been blocked after the previous government failed to hit economic targets set by the program.
U.S. stocks closed little changed on Thursday as hotter-than-expected inflation data dampened hopes for early interest rate cuts this year by the Federal Reserve. The Dow, S&P 500, and Nasdaq were all basically flat, after what had been a choppy session during which the S&P briefly surpassed its record closing high hit in January 2022. The U.S. Labor Department reported that consumer prices rose more than expected in December, with Americans paying more for health care and housing. That pressured stocks, but perhaps shouldn't have, says Melissa Brown, Managing Director of Applied Research at SimCorp.
The numbers seem to come mainly from, or I think it was 2/3 of it came from increased housing costs. I think that is actually one reason to not be particularly worried or concerned that inflation is turning around and going back up. I think there's some lag in the way that housing costs are accounted for in the inflation numbers. And we've actually seen, if you look at other measures of housing costs, they're actually coming down.
In company news, Microsoft briefly overtook Apple as the world's most valuable company. The iPhone maker's shares have dropped nearly 4% since the year began due to concerns over falling demand. Microsoft's shares rose 0.5% Thursday, while Apple shed 0.33%. Crypto stocks reversed early gains, with Coinbase shedding more than 6.5%, Bitfarms plunging more than 13%, and Riot Platforms losing nearly 16%. The SEC a day earlier approved the first spot ETFs to track Bitcoin. And Citigroup fell more than 1.5% after a filing showed the lender booked about $3.8 billion in combined charges and reserves that will erode its fourth quarter earnings, due to be reported on Friday. Other banks fell, including JP Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, which also report Friday. U.S. stocks closed higher on Wednesday, but gains were limited ahead of inflation reports and major bank earnings later in the week. The Dow gained just under 0.5%, the S&P 500 added nearly 0.6, and the Nasdaq rose 0.75%. Megacap tech stocks provided the biggest boost to the S&P 500, with shares of Meta Platforms jumping more than 3.5%, the stock reaching its highest level since September 2021. NVIDIA, which rose more than 2%, hit a record high after fellow chip maker TSMC beat fourth quarter revenue expectations. Mark Lucchini is chief investment strategist at Janney Capital Management.
We're seeing a rotation back into some of last year's leadership with names that propagate communications, services, technology, consumer discretionary, really taking the lead. Not surprising, obviously iconic brands that are expected to deliver pretty good earnings, which we're about to embark on here for fourth quarter. And in an environment that really hasn't changed a whole lot, that facilitated why they were among the leaders last year, which is to say kind of steady state economic activity.
Shares of Boeing rose nearly 1% after tumbling the prior two sessions. CEO Dave Calhoun on Tuesday acknowledged errors by the U.S. plane maker as more than 170 jets remain grounded for a fourth day due to safety concerns. DuckGo plunged more than 37% after Fuzzy Panda Research revealed a short position on the health services company's stock. Wednesday marked a watershed moment for Bitcoin as the SEC approved the first U.S.-listed exchange-traded funds to track the world's largest cryptocurrency. Investors are awaiting the December consumer and producer inflation reports due on Thursday and Friday, respectively, which could help determine the Federal Reserve's monetary policy path. And on Friday, the unofficial start of earnings season kicks off with banking giants JP Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo. All are expected to report lower fourth quarter profits.